Thank you, Rabbi Thaler, for inviting me to speak in honor of Beis Tamuz to the Neshei Chabad of LA. It's really an honor, and it's hard to turn this down, even though I usually have not done this before. And so I hope that my words are poyo pulasan and will bring nachas to the Rebbe, and it will be something that will be of a positive and l'te'elas harabim. Again, I don't usually I haven't done this before, and I feel a bit humbled by this experience. But we all have a shlichus, and so when there's a mitzvah that comes to your hand, we do it. And so, again, thank you for the opportunity. I know this is pre-recorded, but this is going to be listened to on Beis Tamuz, and therefore this is a fabringen for Beis Tamuz. So I would like to begin with what is the idea of Beis Tamuz? What is the chiddush of Beis Tamuz, the novelty of Beis Tamuz? Or as we say in Chassidus, the hamshacha, what we draw down in godliness and energy, what's the new chayas and life and energy that this world gets each year on Beis Tamuz. And as we know, we are taught hayom me'ela niskarim v'nasim, that these days are remembered, and when we remember them, then v'nasim, we bring down, we draw down, we force the godliness that is connected with that day to permeate and to light up our world again. And that hamshacha lasts throughout the whole year. As we know that Rabbi say, the Rabbi brings it down in the Haggadah, we don't say Chasal Chasidur Pesach at the end of the Haggadah, because the Pesach never ends, and the hamshacha is an entire year. And even though the Rebbe says every yontif is that way, it's more so and special with regard to the Pesach Seder. And this really is an important idea, that every yontif, Chanukah, Purim, Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, each one is unique. And each one brings a different hamshacha, a different revelation of godliness that impacts our world. Shavuos is the time of Matan Torah Seinu, and it brings about a revelation of Torah that's for an entire year. And it's one day in the year when it is most palpable and most, let's best say, the conduit through which that chayas comes for the entire year is on Shavuos. And therefore on Shavuos we read Matan Torah and we celebrate it, and we do things that remind us of the day of Matan Torah. The same thing, Pesach is a time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and remembering B'chol Dar Vadar, a person has to remember, and B'chol Yom V'Yom, that you go out of Mitzrayim, and that the Eibishter takes us out of Mitzrayim. And therefore that night, we do specific things to remind us, to celebrate it in that way. So, and then we take that chayas that every day of our entire year, we should be Kilu Yatzah Mitzrayim. Same thing, Sukkot. It's a special reminder of being in the Sukkah, surrounded by the clouds of glory, and Ani HaKavod, and the Schach, and the same thing, Rosh Hashanah. Each Yontif has its own specific minhagim, mitzvahs, which each one is connected with this special, unique hamshacha and chayas that's being drawn down, the life force that's being drawn down for the entire year, specifically through that day. And again, the same thing Chanukah, and the same thing Purim, etc. In Chabad, Beis Tamuz is called the Chag HaGeula, one of the days of redemption, which are also specifically connected with the pasuk Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, that we know that the Friedman Rebbe was given the information that he would be able to leave on a Tuesday, which on Tuesday, Yom Shlishi, is a day that when you say the Tehillim, as it's broken down, I said that wrong, but I do believe, and I'm going to fix that. I don't want to start recording this again. But there's no question that it's Kapitel Nun Hey, so it's actually connected with Oh yes, the third day, because Nun Aleph starts the third day. So Yom Shlishi begins. I was correct. Yeah, the Yom Shlishi begins the third day of Tehillim, as it's divided by the days of the week. And so on that day you say Pada B'Shalom Nafshi in Tehillim. And we know the Alter Rebbe, when he said that pasuk, came out of prison, and it's connected with the Mittel Rebbe Yom Yud, and ultimately with the Friedman Rebbe, and also I believe Hey Tevis was on a Tuesday, and also connected with that pasuk of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. And these are the 4 Chagei HaGeula, the 4 Yomim Tovim that there are in Chabad: Yutes Kislev, Tes Kislev, Yud Beis Tamuz, and Hey Tevis. And each one of these are not a birthday of a Rebbe, it's not the Yom Hilula of a Rebbe, but rather it's a special day, a Chag HaGeula, which means a redemptive thing happened in the world. Something changed in the world on that day that changed the world for the better and brought us closer to the Geula and closer to Mashiach. And so what is the uniqueness of these days? So we know that Yutes Kislev, the uniqueness is about Torah Chassidus and the ability to learn, etc. And we know that Tes Kislev was related to the concept of a Rebbe, a Maimed, and the funds they were paid to a Rebbe, and the concept of a Rebbe as it was in Russia. But what was the uniqueness of Yud Beis Tamuz? And what is this Chag HaGeula? What is it that we celebrate and we talk about in the story we tell, that a Yom Me'ela Niskarim V'Nasim? His introduction to this, it's brought down, the Rebbe says it in Mamarim, that the idea of a Chag HaGeula, of Yutes Kislev, etc., is similar to the accomplishment of Yosef in Mitzrayim. That Yosef in Mitzrayim, that he conquered, he owned, he acquired the entire Mitzrayim. And the question is, why did he do this? Why did he make sure that everything in Mitzrayim would belong to him? And the answer is that once he acquired the entire Mitzrayim and made the entire Mitzrayim belong to him, now the Yidden really were owners of Mitzrayim. And therefore, not only did it lessen the impact of Golus, that the world and the Mitzrayim had less power over the Jewish people, but also the Yidden were ultimately able to take out of Mitzrayim all the nitzutzos and everything that was there, because Yosef had already accomplished that the world itself was fertile ground for the Yidden to accomplish their avodah in this ground. The ground, in other words, Mitzrayim itself was already, so to speak, an eved, was a slave to the Yidden, rather than the Yidden a slave to Mitzrayim. And therefore, ultimately, the Yidden now had much more strength and power to accomplish what they were supposed to, because Yosef had already prepared the ground and made it really theirs from the very beginning. The same way the Rebbe speaks about Yutes Kislev, that once the Alter Rebbe, that the Russians agreed that Chassidus is something that is allowed, now it became that in the land and the world itself accepts that Chassidus is a proper thing to learn. Chassidus is a proper way to live. And therefore it's not as difficult to be a Chassid anymore, because the world itself can't really fight it. Because ultimately the world itself was maskim, and therefore became fertile ground for Chassidus to grow in. So the same way Yud Beis Tamuz, we'd have to say, is something that was here to prepare the world and change the world to become a place that was more fertile and a better partner in the bringing Mashiach and the avodah of the Jewish people. So, in what do we celebrate on Yud Beis Tamuz, and in what does it stand out? So, when we know the story of Yud Beis Tamuz, if we read the Rishima Samaiser and the story of the Friedman Rebbe, is that the Friedman Rebbe, during the time of Yud Beis Tamuz, stood up and said that no country and nothing of the world could break a Jew, could break a Yid. We know that his father, the Rebbe Rashab, said a Torah earlier, which the Friedman Rebbe repeated, that the Yiddish neshama was never put into Golus, that a Jewish soul was never in Golus. Nobody has power over a Jewish soul. Yet when we go through history, we do not find that there was ever a time where the Jewish people, or really anybody, could stand up against a government, and especially a ruling government, a government that was a superpower, and stand up against the government and not break under pressure with regard to Torah. That means that yes, we find stories of Mesiras Nefesh and people who died al Kiddush Hashem, etc. But that somebody stood in the face of a government saying you can't do Torah mitzvahs, and they said, I'm going to continue doing Torah mitzvahs, and continue doing it, B'reish Glei, in public, was something that really was unheard of. Now, we did find once or twice, a few times, that tzaddikim, great people, did such a thing. But that every single individual could do such a thing, it's unheard of. Yet Beis Tamuz, the Friedman Rebbe, accomplished that not only did he stand up with Mesiras Nefesh, but he accomplished, as we see afterwards, and during that time, that hundreds, maybe thousands of chassidim were able to withstand gulags and camps and labor camps and jails, and it didn't break them. And they continued to spread and to grow in Yiddishkeit, to the extent that in Russia, even 70 years later, there were still shuls, and there were still people who were continuing learning Chassidus and Frum. And throughout all the years, there were different families who came out of Russia who were staying strong throughout all this time. No matter what the difficulty was, they were never going to be broken. And really, in a way, this is the story that the Rebbe speaks about in the Maimer Va'ata Tetzava, of the strength that Mordechai and the Friedman Rebbe gave to each chassid by revealing their essence of their neshama, that no matter what the situation, they will not be broken. They're one with the Eibishter. And in that oneness with the Eibishter, they recognize and they feel that they're special no matter where they are, and ultimately they're not under the constraints of whatever prison they're put into. We know that the Yidden being in Golus is called a Golus Shebeseich Golus. There's a Golus from the time of the Eitz Hadas, a tree of knowledge, that there's bad in the world. But then there's a Golus when the Jewish people are under the powers of other nations. Now, the Alter Rebbe says in the Maimer, Ani L'Doidi, that a prince, when he's in prison, he's still a prince, still a different story. When a sar, when a minister is in prison, he's not a regular prisoner, he's a minister. But this goes even further, goes even deeper. And that is, when there's a king running a country, you ask, why does he feed the wardens? Why does he feed the prison chaplain, the prison guards? And the reason is he wants a safe country. He wants his kids to be safe. He wants the prince to be safe. And in case there's a rebel, in case there's somebody who's coming and going to destroy the country, he needs a way to handle it. So as we know, Pnimius HaKavana, the inner desire, is the king is for his children, for his own family. But in order to keep his family safe, in order to sustain the kingdom, he also needs all these other actors and all these other people who make up the country and make up the kingdom that he has. And therefore, as a secondary need, he feeds wardens and he feeds those who run the prison. But what happens if, for whatever reason, the prince is put into prison? For whatever reason, the prince, whether accused falsely or accused rightly for something that he did right or wrong, that's not important. But for whatever reason, ended up in prison. At that point, the reason why the king starts making sure the prison wardens are fed is for another whole reason, which is he wants to make sure that his prince is taken care of properly. And therefore, if he wants his prince to have better food, he has to make sure that the wardens are fed better. We know that when the Yidden go into Golus, all of a sudden, everything that we have in Yiddishkeit comes through this Ayin Sarim and through the nations of the world, which now the Chayas and the energy that we get comes through them. Which means that now they get a greater level of sustenance, and to the extent that they might say that they have more power than ever before, and sometimes they abuse it, and Chas v'Shalom, it's abused against Yidden. Yet B'Pnimius, in the inner workings of the world, really it's still for Torah mitzvahs. It's still for a Yid. It's still for the person who's making a dirla yispara b'tachtainim, for the person who's making a dwelling place for Hashem. It's made for that child of the king. That's why the whole world and everybody gets, as it says clearly in the brachas Tavram, that v'avarcha mevarachaka, but also v'nivruchu b'cha kol mishpachai so'adama, that all nations of the world, the brachas all come because of Yidden, because of the Jewish people. Ultimately, they're always the pnimius. But sometimes when we're lost in prison, it's technical. We could forget that we're the prince. We could forget that we have such power. We could forget that it's really the kavanah is for us. And you could give up. Chas v'shal. So comes the Friedman Rebbe, Beis Tamuz, and says, no. The Yid in Galus is still a Ben Melech. He's still the son of the Eibishter. And he has more power than anything in the world. And to the extent that every prison warden can't stop him from his Torah mitzvahs, and can't separate him from the Eibishter, and ultimately can't destroy him. And with that, the Friedman Rebbe gets up on Beis Tamuz and says, I won't speak in their language, and I won't give in to them on anything, and I'm going to continue putting on my talis and tefillin right in front of them, and I'll keep Shabbos and I'll teach that every chassid could do the same. Why? Because ultimately he's revealing the nitzutz of Rebbe, of Moshe Rabbeinu, that's within every single Yid. The Yechida, the essence of the Yid, the neshama that we all have. And he says, this is unbreakable. This is the Eson. This is the strength of the world, the strength of the Jewish people, the strength of our neshama, that nothing could minimize, nothing could extinguish. And if you tap into that, you'll never be destroyed. Nothing could destroy you. This is similar to the niggin that was sung on Beis Tamuz of Nyet Nyet Nikavad. Nothing other than the Eibishter. There's nothing else. Nothing could destroy us because there's nothing other than the Eibishter. Now, after Beis Tamuz, the Rebbe came and was mechadish, and actually in Atat Tzava you also already find this idea that not only could we not be destroyed, but if we tap into this properly, we could change, and we have to change the entire world. That if we could tap in to this nitzutz, to this eson, the strength of our neshama, the Rebbe, Mashiach, the Moshe that's within each one of us, and we could tap into it and hold on to it so strong that it can never destroy us, then we also have the ability to go anywhere in the world and transform it. And to make it a dirla yispara b'tachtainim, to go make that place a dwelling place and a place where Hashem could be revealed. So the Rebbe taught us not only, as it was Beis Tamuz, that the world doesn't have the ability to destroy us, but also that now we have the ability to transform the world. And because the Friedman Rebbe and the Rebbe went through what they went through, they made that the world already accepts that we have the ability to transform the world. We have the ability to show that we won't be broken, and the world ultimately is nullified and bottled to the neshama of a Yid. But also more so that we could actually transform the world. And that's what the Rebbe wanted us to do on Shlichus. The Shlichus was that we know we're a Shliach of the Rebbe, and we have within ourselves a nitzutz, a spark of the Rebbe within us, of Moshe Rabbeinu within us, of Mashiach within us. And it's our job just to draw it down, reveal it within all of our 10 koiches, in all of our 10 powers, in all of our extremities. This is what the Rebbe spoke about in Atat Tzava. And this is what the Rebbe demanded us on Shlichus. And this is what the Rebbe demanded of every Jew in the revelation of Mashiach, and each one of us, that it's our job to reveal Mashiach within every part of us. So there's one part of Mashiach, which is the part that is the essence of us that can never be destroyed, which the Friedman Rebbe revealed to us and made it part of our world and our nature on Beis Tamuz. And then the Rebbe came and added to this, that with that spark, we could go and change the world, change ourselves, change another, and make the world a dirla yispara b'tachtainim. We're now in the month of Tamuz, and we know that in Tamuz it says that chamor b'tkufas Tamuz kridalei, that a donkey, even in the month of Tamuz, is still freezing cold. It's still cold. So with that idea, I'm going to connect this with a Torah of the Baal Shem Tov that the Friedman Rebbe says in the long letter that he wrote to the Rebbetzin, which he brings down the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Baal Shem Tov once said that on the verse, Kisira chamor seinacha, revet tachas masoi, that when you will see the donkey of your enemy falling under its weight, under its burden, v'chadalta ma'azevlei, and you might think to hold yourself back from helping it, azev tazev imai, you shall help it. Which we know this is the mitzvah, that when you see somebody's donkey falling under its load, it's our job to help to reload that donkey and to help it with its burden and its work and its path. And the Baal Shem Tov translated that we know that a guf is the chomer, is the matter of our being. It's the material of our being. And our neshama, our soul, is the tzura, the form, the neshama. And so it says that kisira chamor sainacha, when you'll see your chamor, you'll see your body, which is your chomer, which is your chomer, meaning materialism, which is the same word as chomer, and the same letters of chamor, donkey. When you'll see it, so then you'll realize sainacha, that he's your enemy. And when you'll see that he's your enemy, you might come to two different ideas, which is v'chadalta ma'azayvlei. So number one, revetz tachas masa, you'll see that it's falling under its burden. And the Baal Shem Tov explained two things. That number one, that it doesn't like it. It doesn't like Torah mitzvahs. It doesn't like it's a burden. And number two is, he's not rushing to change. He's not rushing to do anything. He's very lazy in Torah mitzvahs. But the Rebbe says, that Baal Shem Tov says, but in truth you should know that the guf is very, very special because it was made to be a vessel for godliness. And this is where the important idea that I want to bring out from this story is that this is very similar to the idea that from this Torah. It's very similar to the idea we're speaking about before, about the difference between your Beis Tamuz and the avodah of the Rebbe, which it wasn't only that we shouldn't allow that our neshama shouldn't be broken by our guf, but a whole different avodah. The avodah really is that the guf should be a vessel for godliness. Our body should be something that shines godliness, that tells the world there's an Eibishter, that is a place where you see that the Shechina, that the Eibishter dwells within a Yid, and that it's possible within every single Yid that your guf, your body, could be a kli lelikus. So a kli, a vessel to godliness. So he says, the Baal Shem Tov continued, so you might think v'chadalta ma'azevlei, that you shouldn't help it and you should destroy it through fasting and through other manners by which you would destroy the body. He said, no. Azev tazev ima, you have to help him. You have to support him. Because when you just destroy the body, you're not making it into the vessel for godliness that it could become. To make it into a vessel for godliness, you have to teach chassidus, you have to do mitzvahs with it. You have to uplift it. Because serving and being a vessel to God is an uplifting thing. And the Eibishter being revealed in the world means the world to be uplifted. And therefore, when we want to make our guf to be a place where Hashem could be revealed, it must be an uplifting place. And therefore, it's through uplifting that we make it a kli lelikus. So azev tazev ima, we have to help it. We have to help it and pick it up and help him in his burden. The neshama has to get involved. Not just that it shouldn't, as we said before, the neshama shouldn't just be careful that it doesn't break, but rather get involved with the guf to make it into a kli, to make it into a vessel for godliness. And here the Baal Shem Tov continue that a neshama comes down into this world for 70, 80 years to do a favor for a Jew. And as he said earlier in the Torah, that to do one Jew a favor, begashmias, and for beruchnias, you have to have mesiras nefesh. And this really actually goes back to the very idea of why we're helping the story. The original mitzvah of helping a donkey is somebody else's donkey. And not only that, chamer seinacha, your enemy's donkey. And as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, your enemy has to be somebody who was very close to you and was equal to you in Torah mitzvahs, and ultimately, for whatever reason, has done things different. And you've admonished him and he hasn't changed. And you've admonished him according to chassidus in the proper way. And with all that said and done, you see that he's struggling under his chumrius, under his situation. So comes the Baal Shem Tov and says, or actually the Torah tells us, Kisira chamor seinacha, if you see the donkey of your enemy. And the Gemara says, why your enemy? And he tells you to teach you that if you see a friend's donkey and your enemy's donkey, you help your enemies first. Why? Keneged Yetzahara Dibre Torah, the Torah wants you to break your Yetzahara. And so for sure, the message is here the same way. That sometimes we have our own little donkey, our own chamar, our own struggles that we have, where we're depressed, we're falling down, we have a situation where our chumrius, our material world is pulling us down, and we're getting lazy. And we have, for example, somebody else who we see the same thing by. Or maybe a few people who we see it by, and we're not suffering at all. And ultimately, the Baal Shem Tov is teaching us that we have to go help that person in that situation as well. And not to say and blame and give ideas as to why he doesn't deserve to be helped, or why it's his fault, or how many things he's done bad to me. But rather, it's our job, Kisira Chamar Seinacha, when we see our enemy, forget about only our friends, but even our enemies that are falling under their burden of difficulties of this world, that we have to go out and help them and have Mesiras Nefesh to help another Jew. And to the extent that we might come down into this world for 70, 80 years just to do one Jew a favor, which really this idea brings out the greatness of this neshama that we really have and the guf of a yid that we have. We said before the Baal Shem Tov, the Friedman Rebbe said that a Yiddish neshama will never be broken and will stand up against everything. Nothing in the world could break it. How do we actually celebrate and show how much we care about such a neshama? How high of an esteem we hold it? Or how precious it is to us? It's when we go and help another Jew who's falling under his weight. Then we show how much we care about him, his neshama, and his guf, and the godly vessel and the godly soul that Hashem made that unique person to be. And then, only then, could I actually understand how precious I see it within myself. Because we all love ourselves. So therefore, I would never know if you're doing it because of the godliness within yourself, that you're doing yourself a favor, or because, Taka, you believe in making your gufa a vessel for Hashem. But if I see you're doing it for another, and especially one that's difficult to do it for, that's the true sign that you actually see the strength of a yid. And not only that, you're making a klila likus, as the Rebbe wanted us, that in the world you're picking somebody else up and you're uplifting them and making them a vessel for godliness. That is the idea that we're speaking about, that we transform the world. Not only that we don't break ourselves, we transform the world around us. Now one could say, hey, it's difficult times, materially, things aren't so perfect. We're quarantined, where things are changing rapidly in the world, and I don't know where we're going, I don't know where we're coming. And it's difficult. So we know that the Rebbe also speaks about Beis Tamuz was a time of an Isayin, a test from Hashem. Tests are different than what we call birurim, things where we have to refine the world. Birurim is we eat something, part of it becomes good, part of it becomes bad, part of it we use to serve Hashem, and part of it is it comes out of us. We excrete because it's not used for avodas Hashem. That's birurim. We take the good out of the bad. But an isai means a test. A test means something could be a situation that we don't know if it's good or bad, but it's challenging us. And the challenge is something that we have to overcome. And when we overcome the challenge, we realize that the challenge itself was only there to make us better. Which really, that's what we're facing now today, a challenging time. We don't know if the situation is good or better. We don't know. Mirz Hashem, this is the step straight to Mashiach. And we will look back and say it's the best time that ever happened. Yet we're lost to a certain extent. It's a challenge. So I'm going to tell you a story that the Baal Shem Tov one time, there was two chassidim. One chassid was named Reb Nosson Levent-Handler. He was a wealthy man who had a big business in flax and in clothing, and was a very big Talmud Chacham, had many children that he taught, and a big family. And but at the same time, they weren't such nice people. And it says that Baal Shem Tov spoke to them many times about working on their midas, etc., but they were into their learning and into their being, etc., and who they were. On the other hand, there was another chassid, name was Avram, who was a simple Jew, a wholesome Jew, and who would come to the Baal Shem Tov and hear the Titus, but didn't understand much, but was a person who always worked on himself and his relationship with others. Anyway, it happened one time, the Baal Shem Tov said a Torah, and the Torah was basically with the concept that even a person who works on avodas hamayach, avodas halev, and it was actually was a Torah to the simpler people, that even a person who works on his avodah of heart and mind, but if he doesn't have a care for another, and as the Baal Shem Tov said there, that you might give out money to the poor, etc., but if you don't do it with a feeling for the other, you don't do it with care for the other, then the Eibishter considers like your hands are full of blood and rejects. The Eibishter doesn't reject anybody, but whatever in this regard, that the Eibishter, why? Because you didn't do it with a care for another. And here the Friedman Rabbi says the story that this Reb Nosson learned the difference between the types of avodas that the Baal Shem Tov spoke about, avodas hamayach, avodas halev, etc. On the other hand, Rabbi Avram, he took to heart the importance of you have to care about somebody when you do a mitzvah, and when he do some tzedakah with another, and when he went home, he started working on himself more and more to grow in this avodah of caring more for another person. Anyway, that year Pesach, the Baal Shem Tov was in a very uplifting spirit, in a good mood. And he told his Talmidim that he wants to show them how the Eibishter appreciates the avodah of a simple yid. And he told them all to put their hands on each other's shoulders, and then he put his hands on one of their shoulders, and he completed the circle. And at that time, they saw a vision of two different families at the Pesach Seder. One was Reb Nosson Leventhandler, who had him with his children all around in a beautiful set Pesach Seder with beautiful dishes and words of Torah and everything else. Yet everybody angry and upset and unhappy with one another. And therefore a table that was stressed. And you could feel the stress at the Seder. On the other hand, by this, there was another vision of Rabbi Avram, who was sitting with his wife who had no children, and had only some plain lime vessels, basically some rock cups or something that they had, and basically nothing. And barely any food. And yet him and his wife were singing and dancing together, enjoying the simcha of Yantif that they're able to celebrate together and fulfill the mitzvah of the Eibishter. And the Baal Shem Tov showed this to them and said, look at the Pasha Yid and how much nachas the Eibishter has from him. And this really is a lesson. And the Friedman Rabbi brings this out in the Maimer of Shalom Rav, where he mentions this story, which is you could be in a house full of everything good, full with everything that you could even desire. And even Yantif, you could be unhappy. And you could be in a situation where you have nothing. All you have is your wife, or all you have is your husband, and all you have is, and the simplest of matzah. And yet you could be entirely and at the greatest level of simcha. When we, each one of us, recognize that we're a ben shel melech, when we realize the message of Beis Tamuz, that each one of us has a Rebbe, Mashiach with us, within us, at every moment. This is the strength of our neshama, and the Eibishter chose us and gave us the ability to change every moment in our world. There's no moment in the world that we should feel unhappy in. And if we recognize that, not only that, we could then transform that moment and transform that table, transform the situation to be a moment of happiness, a moment of simcha, and to stand higher than this nisayon, higher than this test, that no matter what the challenge that the Eibishter has given us today, that we could attack it and we could engage it with joy, with simcha, with optimism. And to recognize that if I just do one mitzvah today, if I don't break, and I just uplift for one more moment, I do one more mitzvah, I give somebody else tzedakah, especially I go out to a friend, and I go and I help them, to uplift them in this moment. Say hello, give them something for Shabbos, do a mitzvah with them, speak to them, whatever it takes to uplift somebody in what might be a challenging moment, then even the greatest challenging moments can be the happiest moments. The moments that we say, Ayin lo yirasa elikim zulasecha, a moment of a miracle, a moment of joy that we say only when Mashiach will come will be truly revealed. Because really those moments are here now. We just don't see them. But if we believe in them, and we realize the strength that we have to uncover them, then we do uncover them. And when we uncover them, we take the step to uncovering Mashiach within our lives, within our world, and we march to Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu. Should have a good Yantif, and each one of us should take from the spirit of Beis Tamuz to our families, and to bring the simcha and the messages of Beis Tamuz, that we live with it an entire year and be able to be reunited with the Rebbe and all the Rebbeim with the coming of Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu. A good Yantif.